At this time of year, as we approach Christmas, I always think about a friend of mine and fellow minister, Michael. Michael tragically died suddenly one February a few years ago at the age of 42. But I was blessed to see him in the middle of the December just before he died, and I still remember our conversation. Michael told me that he had just had his annual Christmas wobble. This had become part of his family tradition, to the point that his wife was ready and waiting for it each year. The wobble always came when he was wrapping presents. He said that he looked at the gifts that they'd chosen for their children and suddenly felt overwhelmed by questions about quantity and quality of the presents, questions about cost and thoughtfulness, questions about generosity and austerity and love. I might not wobble quite so obviously, but as Michael was describing his thoughts and feelings, I knew exactly what he was talking about. And I'm sure that many of you, one way or another, will also grapple with the same questions that seem to be raised at this time of year. Have we chosen the right gifts? Have we bought too many presents? Have we bought enough? How do we cope with the extravagance of gifts and new clothes and food and alcohol that advertisers would have us believe are the main thing about Christmas, when we know that the majority of people in the world have very little? What do we do, knowing that many will have no food or shelter or peace or security this Christmas? Are we blinding our children and grandchildren to the needs of the world around us in the way that we usually celebrate Christmas? Or do our children and grandchildren think that we are the ones who are blind to the needs of the world because we look as though we're taking no notice, or because we get hung up or worry over relatively trivial things? My friend Michael said that he was always particularly grateful for his wife in these pre-Christmas moments. When the questions overwhelmed him, she would bring him back to a truth that lies at the heart of family relationships. She would remind him that it's not Christmas that the children really love, and it's not the presents that they really love. It's their being there all together. It's their presence, not their presents. This reminds me of the suggestion that we can only truly love what we can get our arms around. We only truly love what we can get our arms around, what we can hug and embrace and hold. We can't really love things. We might be fond of certain objects or items or buildings. We might enjoy certain activities. We might even say that we love them. But we can only truly love what we can get our arms around, what we can embrace. And I think God understands this about us. I think that God knows that the focus of our love, genuine love, is always someone rather than something. When we think about God, we can feel a bit overwhelmed. We talk of God as vast, bigger than we can imagine, the creator of the universe and all that is, all-knowing, all-powerful, all-loving. Perhaps there are times when we might have a real sense or awareness of something beyond ourselves, that this is not all that there is. Perhaps there are times when we feel that somehow creation hints at there being something other than the usual, something more than the everyday, that there is something mysterious, something beautiful, something awesome or even good behind it all. There are times when I have moments like that, and I'm sure you do too. But sometimes in thinking about the grandeur of God, we make God seem too distant, too remote, and then it can be hard to respond to it all with love. Awe, wonder, frustration, marvel and amazement, these might perhaps seem more natural to us. But love can sometimes prove difficult. And perhaps there is something in the suggestion that we can only truly love what we can get our arms around. To love, to truly love, we need a particular name, a particular face, a particular person, a someone, somebody. And this is what we are gifted in Jesus. When we look at Jesus, we no longer have to guess at God. I believe that the best of what we know about God is revealed in this child and is embodied in the man this child grew to be. If we want to see what God is really like, if we want to know what justice looks like, what peace sounds like, what joy feels like, what fullness of life smells and tastes like, if we want to see the face of God, we see it in this fragile bundle whose birth we celebrate. As we've heard in our reading today, we saw your glory, divine glory shining through a human face, as a mother's eyes live through her daughter's, as a son reflects his father's image. We see your glory in a human being fully alive. No one has ever seen God. It is God, the only Son, who is close to the Father's heart, who has made God known. I think that God understands this about us, that some things can seem too big to grasp, too big to love. I think God knows that the focus of our love, genuine love, is always someone rather than something. And so at the heart of Christmas, God invites us, challenges us to dare to believe that God creeps in beside us, a tiny baby, crying out to be held and embraced and loved. God is with us. This is the message of Christmas. God, out of love for us and knowing how difficult we find it to love God, graced us with God's presence, with God's very self. God still comes to us now in Jesus. We're invited to receive Jesus, to hold him, to love him. Will you open your arms to him this Christmas and embrace him in your life? And the Word became flesh and lived among us, and we have seen his glory, the glory as of a Father's only Son, full of grace and truth. Amen.